Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to learn FastAPI, one of the fastest framework for API development in Python. So let's get started. What are we going to cover in this video? So obviously first what is FastAPI and why we need it now, because we already have a couple of API frameworks available in Python, but why should we consider FastAPI now? And the data validation for your input request and the response using pydantic, and how to build an API obviously using FastAPI with request and response validation. So we'll also see the inbuilt documentation using Swagger and Redoc. This is the two different features available for documentation. So in case if you're not aware what I mean by REST API documentation and Swagger, already made a video, I'll keep that in the description. And the other important thing is authentication. We'll see how we can authenticate or authorize your APIs using JWT tokens. We'll also see how to generate the JWT token, all those stuff. Also, we'll uh, see one example on how you can restrict your API access based on the roles, right? So whoever is watching this video, most of you guys might have heard about Flask or might have used Flask, right? So that's why I thought to have a benchmarking on in terms of performance on Fast API versus Flask API using Locust. Locust is one of the the REST API benchmarking tool. We'll also see that, so that you'll get a very good understanding why we should consider of using Fast API than the Flask, right? And now we'll quickly talk about the features of Fast API. The name itself says it's fast. Obviously, it's fast. It's one of the fastest Python framework available, which is almost equal to Node.js and Go. So you can think of it now. Next time when you are thinking of moving to Node.js or Go for building your REST APIs, keeping performance in mind, you always have an option Python, which is a fast API, right? And data validation. So like based on the type hints, fast API automatically validate incoming request. So one best part which I really like about fast API is, so the data validation, I mean the request validation, what are the requests I'm passing to my API will be validated before it hits the main function of your Python code, which means the validation happens before it hit your API itself, technically speaking, right? So obviously it has an option of the WebSockets. I'll make a separate video what is WebSockets, how it works. And it one beautiful feature which I really like about is a dependency injection system, right? Like it is a simple to use which has an inbuilt feature available in Fast API. Let's say if you have some reusable code, right? Maybe for example a database connection which is a reusable code, right? So you can use that code, right? Instead of you write that code where, I mean everywhere, you can you know import, technically use that code with the help of dependency injection system, right? The other beautiful fantastic feature which I really like about this fast API is the documentation, right? So if you use any of the REST API frameworks like Flask, Django or Spring Boot, so if you want to go with the documentation, mostly we go with Swagger, right? So where you have to document it, how your I mean the structure looks like, how your response structure looks like, where in case of Fast API it builds for you. You need not to write anything specific, you need not to install Swagger, it does everything for you, right? And let's have a quick comparison between the Flask and Fast API. Why Flask is because Flask is the fast, I mean not fastest, I mean like the widely used the REST API framework in the Python world, right? So that's why there's a comparison. When you talk about the size, so when you talk about Flask, it is a micro framework which is mostly widely used to build a microservice API based, right, in Python. Wherein in case of Fast, it's a full stack, right? Micro front end, micro back end, whatnot, right? And when you talk about the features, the Flask has a basic features, and the Fast API has extensive features which you have, which we already discussed just before this slide, right? And in terms of performance, Flask is good, there's no doubt. But in case if I want excellent, then the Fast API is the choice. The documentation is good, and documentation Fast API is excellent and is almost automatic. We are going to see that. And of course, when it comes to the Flask, because it is somewhere released in 2010, which is almost 13 years back, so obviously the community support will be extraordinary. Where the Fast API is pretty recent, somewhere around like 5-6 years. So the community is smaller, but it is going rapidly. So the best use case of Flask is like, whenever there's a simple application, prototypes, right? And Fast API, obviously APIs and microservices. If you're building a complex application, then Fast API is the best choice. Yeah, so hope I convinced you why we should go with the Fast API compared to the Flask, right? As per our agenda, so we have seen what is Fast API and why now, and let's see how the data validation can happen, right? Using one of the very good, fantastic tool, Python package, a framework called pydantic. So using pydantic is the one which we are going to validate the request and response structure, right? Whatever we are passing to, your API. So let's get started. So yeah, let me zoom in. Yes, I hope this is good. So this is my, a simple structure. So what we are going to build is a simple API that takes your name as a request, and this is as a response is sent, right? As I said, like using Fast API using pydantic, you can validate your incoming request. You can also easily validate the response that you are sending back, right? Because obviously the response you may get from database or some other downstream systems, it's good to validate your response before you send it back, right? So now if you see, we have some like the user information like name, phone, email, and their address. And for this particular user, these are the items which we have, right? Like the item name, price details, whether it is delivered or not. If you see, this item is delivered and this item is not delivered. If you see, the delivered is false, right? Which is not delivered, right? Now I need to build a mechanism to validate this request or this response. In our case, we are sending this as a response. So in the request, what I expect is a name, right? So we need to validate both the request and response structure. For that, as I said, we are using pydantic. So you have to install pip3 install pydantic. It will install for you. Now let's build that Python file. So I'll say model validation.py, and first thing obviously we need to import, right? So from pydantic import base model. I'll tell you what is this base model, right? So first what we need to build is, we'll build this, the user details, right? So let's say CLA class, what we name, there's a customer details, right? So we'll say customer and base model. So we're creating a class and we are referring it to or inferring it the base model, right? Now you're saying like we are creating a class of this pydantic which we are inferencing, not inferencing, why I'm saying inferencing. Yeah, we are using the capabilities of this base model, right? Now first name, right? NAME name. What is the data type? The data type is string. And what is the second one? Phone. So phone also I'm looking something string. And then I have email str. So I want to keep some validation on email. is something like I should have a at the rate of, I should have .com. That we'll see, right? For now, let's make it string. And we have address, right? address. So address is something which is again a kind of dictionary, right? So let's create one more class address base model. It has primary and secondary, right? Oh no, primary string and second I'm very bad at spellings. str. Now you can refer this here. That's so nice, right? I really like this, right? So yes, we referred it here. And then what else? Yeah, we build a technically a customer, which is this one, and we need to build this now. So before we build it, we need to put some validation on my primary and secondary address, right? Let's build that validation now. This is address, right? Let's create one more class called, we already built this address, right? So what we name it? Yes, of course, we have to build this validation here itself. Cool. Right. Now what I need to do is, there is a function called field validator. If you see, it's a field validator, right? So I'll say annotation at the rate of field validator, and what field I need to validate, and this particular field I need to validate. That's so nice, right? Come on. Right. Now I need to create a function, obviously, primary, any name you can give. Now this is a class variable and this is my value, right? Now the condition which I want to keep is if the length of the value is greater than 30. So I don't want this primary address where the value should be greater than 30, right? And then I'll rise in exception, rise in value error, technically value error, saying address should not be more than 20 characters in length, right? If not, then I have to return the actual value. So what happens is, so whenever I pass a data, it will come here, right? It will come here, it will check if I have primary and secondary, right? And then, as I said, in the field validator, hey, primary, yes, there is a field validator for this primary variable which you created here, and then comes here, come on, and then it comes here, it do some kind of basic validation and return in case if there is an error. If not, then it return the actual value. That is nice, right? Similarly, you can also do it for your secondary variable, DARY, right? Of course, this is the variable we need to copy here, right? Because this file validator is a kind of annotation. It's kind of a dependency injection, as we again discussed, right? So yes, we have it here. Give me a second. Yes. Okay. Now we are good with this. Now what we need to build? We need to build these items, right? This is again a cool stuff. We have an email by any chance? Oh, we have an email, right? Yes. So for email is also, I need to, as I said, I need to build some kind of validation, right? So email, it has an inbuilt, the pydantic has an inbuilt email validator where you need not to write any what you call extra logic. You can simply refer this here. Life is so easy, right? So any value comes here, it will actually call this particular function and validate your email, right? And what else? This one item, right? So class items extend to your base model and this item, right? Come on. The item is str. Let me copy this. And we have SKU, which is str. We have quantity, which is integer. We have price, which is float. And we have delivered, which is boolean. That's so nice, right? We also have boolean. Now, if you see, this items is part of this customer, right? Of course. And if you see, this items is a list of the products, right? So now here, what I'll say is item, and I'll say list of, not this, list of items. What's wrong in this? Okay, we need to, there's one more package called typing, right? It's typing. I need to import the list. And in this typing only, we also have an option called optional, because there's something which I want to make optional. For our testing sake, we can say, but it is easy, so I just quickly show you. In case if you want to make anything optional, you can say something like this: this phone is an optional. In case if you're getting any value, it must be string, right? So this is how, we build a simple model validation for your request or response structure, right? So, oh yeah, silly mistake. This should come here. Did you see the warning is gone? Silly mistake happens. Okay, so now before we actually jump into our the Fast API, let's validate this file. It is pretty simple here how to validate. So yeah, first let's open this file. Open, what is this, customer.json. Of course it should be, there's a case and just why the C is capital here, and as CUST customer, right? So now data is equal to json.loads loads customer.read. I need to import JSON, right? Now this is the time to validate. I'll show you how easy it is, right? So this is your main technically class, right? Which has name, phone, all these things, your items, everything, right? Now I'll say this customer of data. So we need to unpack it, star. Now let's print, customer. Let's run this. So oh yeah, if you see it's items and it's an item what we have given, right? So wrong, the variable name we have given. Now let's run this now. It should work. Let me clear and run this. Yes, let me run this now. Did you see there's no validation errors here? Now let's try to create some issues. Let me give an invalid email ID. I saved it. Let me run this again. Did you see? Email. Value is not a valid email address. The email address is not valid. It must be exactly one at the sign. That's so awesome, right? I just imported this function and just say that. That's it. It's a, this email type is email str. So it does the validation for me automatically, right? And one of the validation we keep is like the address should not be more than 20 characters. Oh, primary address somewhere on the earth. I'll just type something random. Save it. Come here. Run it. Did you see? We have two issues. One is with the email. We have given the wrong email. The other one is with the address. See, it is very clear. Did you see? Under address, right? Primary variable, right? The primary field or variable has a problem. It's so detailed, right? Under address, primary, right? The address should not be more than 20 characters in length. This is what we have given here, right? This is really awesome, right? So hope you understand how you can validate your request data or your data. In fact, it could be a request or response using pydantic, and you see it's pretty simple, right? So next we'll see how to build a simple API using FastAPI. Yes, so now let's create a file. We'll create a simple the FastAPI, like kind of hello world FastAPI. So sample underscore fast API.py as usual. So like pydantic, you have to use pip3 install fast API, and from fast come on man, fast API import array fast API, right? So import JSON. Now we need to create an app where an object of a fast API, we name it as an app. It looks almost similar to Flask, in case if you already worked on Flask. It's almost similar to create a simple one. Now at the rate of app dot what method you want, whether you want post, get, put, delete. Maybe we'll say get. What I say, like I'll say hello, some name, right? Now I'll create a function def hello. I just simply return hello world, right? That's it. Now let me clear this. See, in order to sorry, this is not required. So in order to run your fast API, so you have to install UVCon. I'll just write it. Come on, man. Right, for fast API. Yeah. So similarly for the Flash, we have gUnicorn, right? Because obviously if you build a REST API, you need some server to deploy it, right? For Flask, we have gUnicorn. Like similarly for fast API, we have UVCon. It's this one, UVCon, right? So let me run this. It's Python 3-m UVCon, and it is sample colon app. It ran. Now it is running on this. Let's copy this. Obviously it is not found / hello. What happened? Silly mistakes. It should be / here. Let's save this now. I go back and run it, you still get the same error. Is because whenever we did some changes, we need to restart it, right? So just close this process here, Control C, and run it. So instead of do that, you just say space hyphen hyphen reload. So what happens is whenever there is a change, it will automatically restart the server for you instead of you say Control C again start it, right? Now let's do this. That works, right? Now we'll see how to get the query parameters, which means it's something like this. These are the query parameters, right? So name equal to Teja. So for that we need to import request as one of the method here. So you can map here request req is this, right? So whatever the request I'm getting, it could be from the query parameters, it could be a JSON body, anything will be captured here and storing in this variable that we are referring it here, right? So you can say print, so req dot, it's a query parameters as I said, right? These are technically query parameters. This is the query that we are getting from the URL, right? So I'll say query params slash name is what I am looking for. Now if you notice here, come on, so if you notice here, now I'm clicking on save, the application is automatically reloaded, right? Now let's hit this URL again. If you come back, did you see the Teja is here? We are just printed. So I can say hello Mr. plus the query parameters. Did you see? Hello Mr. Viswateja, right? So now we'll just try to remove this, right? And put a request here. Let's see if it works. Did you see? So we cannot use this method or function directly. It has to be mapped in your function. So in our case, hello is the function which is processing your the REST API request, right? This hello. So it has to be mapped in such a way so that you can get either the data from the query parameters like this, or maybe from Postman, come on, something like this, right? So let's create another the simple the FastAPI code where we can see how we can validate the income request, right? So let's clone this. So we'll just rename it to validate request. It's a meaningful name. Right? So now, yes, what we need to do is we'll do simple addition. So as I said, we need to validate the input request, right? So let's create add something like this. Okay, we need to import from pydantic import base model, right? I'll say a as integer. Oh, sorry. Int, b as int. So this is one of the coolest feature of the FastAPI, right? So now we'll see how I'm sorry, it can be validated. So in our previous video, right, so we're taking a request, a simple request, so that might applies for your get, post and everything, but ideally the best way is to validate your request, as I said, right? So in this case I'll refer to add instead of this request. Now this request what we imported is nowhere need, no, I mean it's not at all needed now. So okay, so now let's run this. we say sample fast API, right? Sample, no, validate colon app, as I said, reload, right? Now let's run this. Let's run the postman. It says method not allowed. Yeah, it should be post here. Let's run this. It says internal server. Yeah. Oh yeah, sorry. We don't have any query parameters here, right? You can still pass from here. You can still pass like name equal to Teja. That works even in the post call, not just the get method. Come on. Yes. So now let's get this. Now we'll see if there is any error we get, right? So now if you see, I said integer, right? Now let's print the request dot JSON. I'm not sure if this is the right one. Yes. Did you see? What I'm passing this 1 and 2 is in a double quotation. Technically it's a string. Whatever you pass in singular double quotation is a string, right? Now, but once I'm getting it, did you see? I got it as an integer because this guy is very smart enough to convert your string to integer, but not the other way around. When I say other way around, let me say ONE1, right? Definitely not. So if you see, I got an error. The type is, it says in parsing error because it's not able to parse it, right? That makes sense. And where in our request body, which variable a, right? What is the message? Hey, input should be a valid integer, unable to parse it, right? And this is what I'm passing it, ONE1. That's so awesome, right? It validated before it reaches it. Did you see it not even hit this print statement? If you see, right, it says unprocessable entity. That's so nice, right? And also the other cool thing which we've seen is like it is doing auto parsing for us, right? Did you see there's some warning here? What it says? It says the JSON is deprecating. This guy makes things complicated. We can include this. Now let's store this in this data equal to. So we need to load it, json.loads loads, right? And now you can say data of a plus, come on, data of b is not equal to. Did you see I got 3? That's so nice, right? So this is very pretty simple to validate your incoming request, right? Using the pydantic. Cool. Let's create another sample, the fast API, where it will validate both the request and the response, right? So in this case, we validate only the request. We'll also see how we validate both and in an effective manner, right? How we can send the the exception in a very neat manner. We'll just understand what I'm talking about. So let's create one file, customer info.py. I already have a code snippet because by now you must be familiar, right? There are a few things which is not required. See what it does is, as you know, it requests the customer ID, right? No, it will validate the customer ID. So in our case, what we are simply doing is just reading this customer.json file we created, right? And we are validating it. So we already seen how we can validate the file. So we wrote a sample code here and we run this and it will validate, right? So In this case, in the previous example we have seen, we have the validation file within the same Python code, but in the real time we'll have most of the variables or columns. So it is always good to maintain something like this, right? So here what I'm importing is customer and the cust ID. If you see here from the model validation Python file, I'm importing the customer and cust ID. So here I'm doing my request validation, right? And then as usual I'm loading the file and I'm just doing this. So let's run this. It started. So send this. Did you see there are two validation? Does it really looks good if you see something like this? I didn't like this, right? So let's jump back to our Visual Studio. So in pydantic there is an option called validation error. So during the try catch you can say except you can simply say this as error, right? Now if you print error, we'll see what you get. You get so much things here, but yes, there is a way where you can keep it very nicely. So you can say ERRORS. Let's print what we get now. We get in a JSON format. Earlier we get some random string, right? So now we get in a JSON format, right? Okay. Now we'll see how nicely we get an exception. Did you see? Earlier it was not this much, right? Let me show that how it looks before this. This is so nice, right? Now if you say there are two errors, right? There are two errors in two columns, obviously. One is email. This is the reason. The other one is inside the address, the primary, right? It's so nice, right? Now let me run this. This is what the previous error. It's so difficult to read it, right? Even if you are exposing it to the other application, right? In case if they get this as an exception, how they decode it, right? So that's why this is a cool thing. So what we are doing is in this error, we are just getting only errors, right? And I just given number of columns where there is an error. I'm just getting the error, length of error, and then what are the error names, right? And then what is the location, right? Did you see? It's actually loop, right? So for columns in errors, in this errors, I'm getting the location and the message, right? Now let's run this. Oh, I didn't saved it. Did you see? This is my location. And the location is nothing but your email ID, right? In this case, under the address, the primary. That is technical location, and then we are getting a message here. Did you see? Location and message, right? You can print 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 errors. Did you see? Yeah. And this is what we are. So what I did here is I just took the length of this error. So if you have two errors, you'll get 2, 3, you get 3, right? In your case it's 2, so we get 2, right? And then we are looping here. We are getting a location. Did you see? This is location. This is an email ID, and we are getting a message, right? You can also pass what exactly you are getting, right? This is an input. So this is input, the request that you are passing, right? So based on that, you can JSONify, beautify your exception handling that you can pass back to your caller, right? So next thing is gonna be very interesting. So we are gonna see Now let's see what we covered. So we covered what is for data validation, how to build. We're gonna see this. Cool. Now let's see how API documentation works in terms of FastAPI. As I said at the starting of the video, the API documentation is pretty easy in FastAPI. In fact, it is almost automated, right? So in case if you're not aware what is API, documentation, I already made a cool video on it using Swagger. I'll keep those link in the description. Please watch it. Now let's see. We know this is the URL. You just need to say docs. Awesome. That automatically loaded. We didn't write any logic for this, right? It automatically came. And if you see, we have a schemas. We know, right? The customer ID, right? Which is here, right? Which is in our model validation. This one, it says int, right? Did you say it says int? Now let me make it, sorry. Let me make it string and come here and refresh. That instance, right? Pretty fast. Did you see it's string here? Now we know our request structure, right? What we are expecting in our for our API is just a name, right? But if you see, come on, the response, it doesn't have any, right? For validation error, we have seen it, right? We have the detailed information just before we have seen, right? Details, location, message type. It is because it is able to, where is our, customer info. Yeah, because, did you see here? It is very clear. So it decoded this structure and what you got it here. Similarly, we also need to see, like, let's say, whenever I want to see a documentation for my REST API, I would like to see the input structure, how my response structure looks like, and how my exception structure looks like, so that I can, so that the upstream or downstream systems can plan accordingly for their development, right? The sample request and response structure is always good, including the exception handling. So we can see the exception handling, the response structure, which looks really nice. Now to make it, to see the response structure, again, it's pretty simple. See, this is your incoming this thing, right? The resource. So what I need to do is response model, right? Our response model is customer, right? Your request model is customer ID, cust ID. This is what we mentioned here, right? And my response model is this, because that is what we are sending in as part of response, right? So just say customer here, save it. Now it is just string here. Now this is where the magic happens. Did you notice this? That's so nice, right? So so now this make what you call the developer's life easier. So it's cool, right? So we build a fast API which is really fast. We have the cool API documentation. What's next? Okay, I build everything. Now how do I secure my APIs, right? And you might have heard about these two different terms, right? One is authentication, the other one is authorization. What is authentication? Authentication is something like, am I the valid person or a right person to log in into the system? Okay, I am authenticated. I am a valid person. I will log into log into a portal or a system. Now, when it comes to authorization, as an authenticated person, what is my role, right? What are the different things that I have an access to, right? Let's say I authenticated myself. Now if I'm an admin, now I'm authorized to add a user, update a user, delete a user, right? Now I logged in as an employee. Now my authorization is more of viewing my details and viewing just my details. Maybe I can edit my details, but I cannot add a new employer person there, right? So authorization is something like what access do you have, right? Authentication is, are you the right person to log into the system or a portal? Authorization is what access you have, right? There are few tools that helps you to configure, the OAuth servers, like, the Microsoft App Registry, AWS Cognito, and there is a company called OAuth 2 itself, right? These tools will help you to set up your centralized OAuth framework, right? As I said, consider that OAuth is already, configured or installed in our case, right? Now, keeping that in mind, how do I authorize or authenticate our REST API? So for that, one thing that we need to understand is a JWT, which is JSON Web Tokens. So this is the ultimate, the format that is used to authenticate or authorize your APIs, right? So technically, this JWT tokens are generated by your OAuth servers, right? So we can also generate it. It's not necessary that you have to have, the OAuth servers or frameworks. We'll see how we can generate by ourselves. So okay, before that, what are the major components we have as part of the JWT? Is a header, payload, and signature. What header contains? Header contains which algorithm is used to encrypt your payload, right? And type is nothing but your, it's a JWT, right? And you have a payload. That is the place where your actual request, stays or holds. And then the signature, right? So these are the three major, the components of a JWT, right? Now let's quickly see how we can, uh, generate a JWT tokens. What happened? Yes, it's here. Now JWT generate.py. So I already have a sample code to it. So we need to install pyjwt, right? So this is my payload. So this expiry is very, very important, right? So whenever you are generating a JW token, you should set some expiry to it, right? So which means let's say if I receive a JW token and I want to validate it, so first thing it verifies expiry, whether this token is expired. If it is expired, it won't even reach your endpoint, right? So for that, what we need to do is we need to encode this payload, and this is the algorithm which we were talking about here, right? This algorithm, there are few algorithms which we're not going to discuss now. And secret, so whenever you are encoding it, you need to have a secret, right? I mean, you can give any name, it's not necessary this, it should be some complicated string that you need to give, but ideally this is not the recommended or the best practice to do. What you have to generate is you have to generate some keys, a public keys and private keys. You hold a private key, right, which is used to encrypt a deepkit, and public keys will be shared, with the end users. Right? Now let's run this. Okay, maybe I'll create a new terminal here. Oh, come on. Yes, did you see? It generated a JWT token. Now let me paste it here. Yes, HS256, right? Did you see? There might be RSA as well, RSA 256. Let me run this. Not sure if that is the right name. No, that's not right. But yes, did you see? This is a Linux epoch. So what we said here was 100 minutes, right? Maybe, yes. Oh, come on. This is a Linux epoch time. Linux Linux epoch. If I paste this here, I said 100 minutes, right? So which is gonna expire 18 hours 35 minutes, which is gonna expire at this time. Oh, this is my time zone. It is gonna expire at 1:44 a.m. right? So then at the time is 12 a.m. recording a video at the midnight. Okay, so it is 100 minutes, right? Now let's make it a minute and just run this. Right, now let's decode this epoch, which is gonna expire at 12:07, right? Now the time is 12:06, which is gonna expire at 12:07. As I said, it's a 1 minute, right? Now this plays a crucial role, right? So usually what I see is mostly in the real time, it will be in seconds. So what happens is why we need this expiry token is like, let's say if there is any middleman attack, right? So there will be some latency during this hijacks or whatever it is, right? So in that case, this helps, and there must be an expiry date, right? Like there should be a time limit to reach this request to the destination or your API, right? Now I build a little bit. Okay, now the other thing is we need to decode it, right? So now fine, my API got this encoded JWT. Now we need to decode it, right? So decode is pretty simple. You'll say jwt.decode, and yes, you pass this here. Oh yeah, I need to specify an algorithm because I should know which algorithm is being used. Okay, it says it's required to you to pass the algorithms. Okay, I just written as an algorithm. It must be algorithms. Now let's run it. A valid error, right? It says invalid signature error. So whenever we are encoding it, we pass some value called secret. It's not necessary to be secret. As I said, it should be a random string, right? And when you're decoding it, you have to pass the same value to it to decode it. That's what it says, invalid signature, right? Whenever I'm encoding it, as I said, this is the signature I passed, right? So now let's run this. Now it ran successfully. Let's print it. Now run it. Did you see? We are able to successfully decode it, right? Now what we need whenever you want to generate a JW token, whenever you want to encode it, use JWT encode, and you need to pass your payload and some random key. We call it a secret key. Or as I said, you can also provide your public or private keys to encrypt and decrypt, and which algorithm you need to encrypt it, right? The similarly decode, we need the same information to decode that value. Now for our use case, let's make a little bit complex. So I use this code. Okay, let's create one more JWT keys.py. So let me explain this code quickly. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating a JWT token with the help of private key. As I said, creating a JWT token with the simple secrets is not the ideal way. So we usually in the real time we generate the JWT token with some private keys, right? So if you see, I already created this private keys. So I'm reading this private key here, right? And whenever I'm encoding my JWT token, I'm using the private key. Similarly, if you see here, I'm reading my one of the public key which I generated. Whenever I'm decoding it, I'm using the public key. So now let me run this. Did you see I'm able to decode it, right? And this is my JWT token which we generated using this private key. Okay, now I generated a JWT token. Now how do my REST API will authenticate or authorize it? How does it do it? So obviously this JWT token validation or authorization should happen before it hit our function call, before it hit our function, right? Like similarly, if you see this request input data validation is happening before it hit the request, right? I mean, it hit the function itself, right? Similarly, it should also happen in the similar fashion, right? For that, we need to write some logic. I already have the logic written in my local. Let me write it here. JWT token validation .py. I'll explain this, don't worry. So here I'm importing the fast APIs, request function and HTTP exception. These two are important, and of course the JWT which I'm importing it. So here I'm reading my public key, because so whenever you want to decode it, what you need is a public key, right? These resources we'll discuss in some time, and this is the function which I created. So as we discussed, right, the request function, I'm attaching or mapping it to REQ variable. So I'm getting the URL. We'll discuss like why I created this resource, what I'm doing it. First, let me show you the decoding part, right? The similar thing we know, right? Now whenever we are passing our the JWT token, it will be in the headers. I'll explain that, but you know how to decode it. We already seen it, right? Now this part we'll see in some time. It's mostly the role based access. So using JWT you can authenticate, and also you do the role level access to your APIs. We'll discuss that. And this is the cool things here, we are validating it. Is that the signature error, right? If there's something wrong with the decode, is it invalid algorithm? It also by default validates if the JWT token is expired. Now we have this logic. Now how do I call this particular logic into my API? So that's what beauty comes in, right? Now we need to import that particular function, right? From JWT token validation import token, right? That's my function name here. Now there is one more cool function called depends. Okay, this is really nice. You'll definitely like it, right? Now before it hit this function, whenever my API is called, before it hit function, it will validate my incoming request, right? Similarly, it should also validate our JWT token, right? And that's where that depends on comes. So what I'll say is request colon str depends on token, right? So this is a format that we need to handle. I'll get the data here and converting it to kind of string, and depends on what we imported. It depends on this particular function which is in this Python file, right? Now it's the time to call our the REST endpoint from the Postman. I'm not sure if I shut down this. Is that API running anywhere? Okay, it is. Now let's run this. Did you see? It says user not found, right? Now let's remove this particular piece. We get depends on, right? So now when you run it, it works, which means, so the validation is happening before it is coming to this function itself, right? So before it enters into this, it will first validate your request and then your JWT token, which is internally calling this particular Python file, right? Now how do I, now like I kept it back, now it says user not found. Now the JW token must be generated now somewhere. We generated, okay, that's fine. We'll generate again, not this. With power keys, yes, this is the one. So now let's copy this. Okay, go back to the authorization. Here we need to select the bearer token, paste it here. Now run it. Awesome, it worked, right? So now if I do mistake somewhere else, right? So I just removing the E at the start. I'm deleting it. Now let me run this. Did you see? It says invalid header string. So which means whatever the token you're passing is invalid. Now I made it correct. It's working. Now what we'll try to do is let's reduce this time period to 0.001. Right? Now let's run it. Now you see the token is already expired because it's almost very like less seconds, right? Now let's run this. Did you see the signature is expired? That's so nice. Let's keep somewhere around maybe 0.1. Run it quickly, fast, copy this, go back, paste, send it. Signature is expired, right? So now let's give 1 minute, run it. Now we have a minute time. Slowly come here, run it. It works. Now after 1 minute, if you try, obviously you'll get the signature validation error, right? So now this is really nice. So what happens is I'm just trying it here. Whenever something went wrong during the decoding your JW token, whether we are passing the wrong JW token, whether it is expired, it will automatically come to one of this, right? If you see 401, so we are passing the status code and detailed error back, right? And if you're not passing anything itself, then that's where the user not found comes, right? Initially, if you've seen what you got is user not found, right? When you're not passing any of this thing, right? I mean, now let me delete this, run. You see, user not found. That is a message which we generated, right? So what else I wanted to cover? Oh yeah, another one. Now we authenticated it, right? Now we need authorization, right? Whether this person is right person to access this customer information, right? And that's where I have resource kept here. This is the resource. In our case, the resource is customer. The URL what you get is, we call it typically resource. Now see, if I run it, the signature is expired because we given the expiry date of the JDEP token is a minute, right? So now coming back, customer is one of my resource, right? So let me print the body here. So you see what request we are getting, right? Come on, this makes sense. Let me put back to 100 minutes. Go back, run this. Now if you see, it says 1 2 3. Let me delete this. Let me keep only the required files. In the rest, right? Do you see? In the rest, before that there is something printed called 1 2 3. We'll see where it is getting printed. Did you see? It is here, which means first it came here, right? It should be in JWT. Yeah, oh, I'm sorry. Did you see? In JWT validation. This is what it I'm sorry, it came first, right? Okay, this is something not the right. So you can also, I'm also printing the decoded data here. Did you see? First it came to in JWT and then it printed the decoded data where the role is admin, right? And then exit. And then it came to your function. And that's why after that it is printing it. As I said, it will come inside this function only if this token JWT is validated, right? Now what I am trying to do is, if I get the request from this resource, this is where I do, right? Request.url.path, right? What it does is you'll get an URL, and in that URL what you get is a path. So technically someone call it resource and someone call it a path, right? Now I'm just checking in the headers, right? So if you see, whatever you are passing as part of this authorization, that will be as part of your headers. In headers, I'm getting, it's a dictionary technically, right? I'm getting this authorization. Though you see it's a bearer token, it's technically an authorization if you see, right? There are so many techniques of, authorization, right? I'm getting it and then I'm decoding it. So after I decoded it, right, as I just printed here, right, one of the value is admin, right? So I'm checking if it's not admin and if this particular resource is not in this, then he is not a right user, right? So now let's generate one more. Okay, we'll now let me remove this resource or a URL path. Now let me run this. Did you see? You don't have access to this resource. That's a valid, because for this JWT token, this resource is not there. So obviously it doesn't make sense, right? Now I just remove this R here. Now let's run. It comes. Now let's generate a JWT token, not this one. Yeah, with this case, where I'll make admin1. Run this. Now take this one. Send this one. It still files. It's because if you see, I'm passing admin1. If I want to access this particular REST API, he must be an admin. But what we are passing is some other role, right? So obviously we can't give them the access, right? So this is how the authentication and authorization works, right? So we authenticated the JWT token and then we are checking whether he is an authorized person to use this REST API or not. Awesome, right? So now let's do the benchmarking between the Fast API and the Flask API in terms of performance, right? And if you see, this is a simple Flask application. What it does is it just read the JSON file and send the response back. That's it, right? So when you are performing a benchmark, right, you should have the same set of logic, but we do a little bit different, where in case of Fast API, we already seen how to build this. Will benchmark between the simple application, the simple API, with this little bit complicated API. Ideally we won't do it, but let's do it in a different way, right? As you know, it does the request validation and then it will check your JWT token, it reads the files, and then again it will validate the file. It has couple of exception handling. So compared to this Flask, it has lot of steps. So we'll see how the benchmarking goes, right? So there are many tools for benchmarking. So Locust is one of the tool where it helps you to do benchmarking, or you can say load or stress testing, right? So it's pretty easy. Like you should say pip or pip3 install Locust. So here I'm importing three methods here: HTTP user, task, and between. So this is my sample data, as we already seen how to test this API from the Postman, right? And these are my headers, the content type, and the authorization, my JW token, right? So here I created a class and I'm extending it to HTTP user because its APIs are HTTP based, right? And we have wait time. So let's say if you have multiple tasks, in that case, uh, spinning the different tasks, right, will happen between this time, random time frequency between 1 to 5 seconds. And this is actually my task. If you see, I imported here, right? This is actual task. Like you can have multiple tasks, right? And this is my resource, right? So yes, this is a resource, customer is a resource. We have a URL, colon, port, and slash. Whatever we have after the slash is technically resource, right? So here I'm passing my data and my headers. This is so cool. I have seen so many benchmarking tools, but I see this is pretty simple, right? So in order to run this file, what you need to do is you need to say python -m locust -f and your python file, right? Now just run this. Yes, it is running in this port, right? Let me bring up the browser. This is how it looks like when you open it. Now here you have three main options. One is number of users. So if I say 20 users, and if I say 4, and this is my address. So as I said, right, this is my address, or the application where it is hosted /customer, which if you see, we have given it here, right? Now what happens when I click on starts farming? So here if you see 20 users and the span rate is 4, what it does is within the 4 seconds there are 20 users who call our API, which means within the 4 seconds the 20 times your API will be hit. So let's say if I say 100 and if I say 4, or maybe if I say 2, within 2 seconds the 100 request will be hit at a time. Technically speaking, there will be 100 users who will be accessing your API in the 2 seconds range. If I say 1, in 1 second 100 users will be accessing your application. That's what it says. So now when you click on start, so this is how it works. Like it says how many requests, how many fails, what is the medium, 90 percentile, 99. So I already have the reporting down, the benchmark downloaded. You can click on stop here. In case if you run and you want to download it, you click on download here. You can download the reports. So here are the reports. If you see, this one is on Flask and this one is on the Fast API. If you see, like on the Flask, I have 4.28 requests, which is 4,281 requests. Where in case of Fast, I have 4,237 requests, almost same, right? And there are no failures in this case. And if you see here, the median time, response time from your API is 8, and the median response time of a Fast API is 7, which is pretty good, right? Like in Fast API, we are doing so many things like request validation, JW token validation, response validation, right? Which is very good, right? And if you see, average response time of Flask is 9.2, right? Maybe you take it as seconds, technically it's a milliseconds, right? And average response time for Fast API is 10.1, which is negligible, right? Like, because as we know in Fast API, we are doing so many things, right? As I said, so many validation we are doing, right? And if you see, minimum response time is 1.8 and the minimum response is 2.03, which is technically too negligible, right? And the maximum response time it took is 99. Here it is 154, which is good. I mean, not that bad. Maybe obviously, right? Like if you are doing the same thing what we are doing in Flask, what I mean here is like, even in the Flask, the Fast API, if it does a simple task, it would be definitely faster, no doubt. So this benchmark is just to show you, like, how fast